Hey guys, I'm Pablo with Tandem, and today we are going to be pulling ahead on this 97 FZJ80. So, stick around. Alright, so before we get started, we need to go ahead and get the radiator out of the way, the battery out of the way. Let's take the upper intake plenum off, the whole intake system, and start exposing the areas of what we need to get the cylinder head off the truck. We're also going to be pulling the front timing cover, timing chain, and oil pan. We're going to be resealing all of those. And so for right now, let's just kind of get this area cleaned up a little bit so we can get closer to the cylinder head, and I'll see y'all here in a second. Okay guys, so I had to stop the time lapse because I'm taking apart the radiator. And this, I don't even know what this is. It's like an oil for sure, so I guess the head gasket has already failed, but I am pulling that. And if I can stick my finger in this coolant, like this is what's coming out of it. So so it's gonna be interesting once I get the head off of it. We're gonna see how the coolant ports are in the actual head. Excuse me. I kind of have a bit of a cold, and it's really irritating me. But I'm gonna continue, and hopefully it goes well. Alrighty, so I got the radiator out. Now I gotta get I need to get most of the belt out. And this thing's been suffering. Let me get a flashlight so y'all can see. She's been suffering from some oil leaks, it seems like. And sorry, so this is an LED flashlight, and somehow it just makes the frames kind of stutter, but the radiator was in pretty bad shape. The cooling system is just disgusting. I mean, I don't even know where to go from that, except tear the head out, check out all the coolant ports and everything. There's an oil cooler under this exhaust manifolds that goes along the block. We're gonna have to tear into that as well and make sure that's all flowing properly. But yeah, she's definitely gonna be a project. The radiator itself is in a pretty sorry state. Good news, we have a Rare Morrison radiator that we're gonna go ahead and put in it. So this will go straight in the dumpster. I went ahead and already acquired the side brackets and everything for it. But yeah. Okay, so we got the radiator out. We talked about that. I'm currently working on getting the upper plenum off and getting some of these old connectors out of the way. You're gonna find a lot of dry rot hoses and stuff like that, and most of this is gonna have to be replaced. Also, one common thing on the FZJ80s, the ones that have the 1FZs, is this heater control valve. And I don't know if you can see that, but these tend to be problem childs because they're made out of plastic. They're at the back of the engine bay, they absorb a bunch of heat and they fall apart. So we'll have to be replacing that one too. And in order to get this upper intake manifold, they're a real pain to do. So the bolts are actually located underneath the intake manifold. So for this side here, it's relatively easy because you can get to it mostly from here. This back side here, you have to get from underneath the truck, and usually what I do is I'll stick it on the lift it up all the way, and I run a very long extension, and then I can reach the two 12mm bolts in the back for the back of the plenum. So I'm gonna keep plugging away, and we'll see y'all once I get most of this torn apart, and then I'll kind of go over what we're gonna do next. All right, so the upper plenum is off. That was a pain in the butt to do. Granted, I took about 20 extra steps, been necessary to do it, but remember, we're doing this in mind of taking the cylinder head off. There's a couple stuff I wanted to show y'all before I continued. The EGR valve, this is the EGR piping. Now, if you look at this harness right here, and you can see that this harness was going and chafing against the actual EGR tubing. So usually what I do is I loosen up the harness and relocate it once I'm in here. And we're gonna have to go ahead and weatherproof this here and make sure none of those wires are chafed or damaged. Because when that does happen and it goes through the insulation, it's the injectors that get affected first. So you'll be chasing a random misfire, and you've replaced all the parts, and it's kind of hard to tell what it is when it just ends up being the harness. But yeah, I think this is as far as I can take it for today. It's getting close to 6 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and finish up for now. Tomorrow I'll take the actual intake manifold off, take the valve cover off, we'll take the exhaust manifolds off, and then we'll take the cylinder head out, and I think that'll be the end of this episode once we get to that point. So let's transition to tomorrow. How do we want to do that, Joey? Let's just slap the camera?
Yeah, slap her.
All right, I'm gonna slap it.
No, slap it.
Slap. Tomorrow. So, I already got some of the stuff taken care of. I took the fuel rail out. And Joey, if you want to go take a look at this harness over here. This is the fuel injector harness, which is also all the NOx sensor, O2 sensor harness, and it also is connecting the oxygen sensors. And Toyota was very kind enough to route it through this hole right here of the actual intake manifold. So we're gonna have to lift up the truck, disconnect the transmission harness the transmission from the harness, and then also the oxygen sensors. And then once those are loose, then we can actually take this harness away from the intake manifold, and the intake manifold can come out. Usually when I'm just doing just the head gasket itself and not the extra amount of work that we're doing to this truck, is I just pull the intake manifold off to the side, and then I leave it inside the truck so I don't have to do all that. But since we're doing a lot of extra work to this, we're gonna go ahead and separate the harness from the truck, so that way we can take this intake manifold out of the truck and clean it. And I left an injector in here. So, taking this with me. All right, so we got the main harness off along with the fuel rail. Now, the connections that I was talking about that go all the way to the bottom towards the transmission is the Prindle switch connector and also the O2 sensors connectors. Once those were two disconnected, they came up from the bottom of the truck up towards the engine bay and then out through this intake manifold hole here where the harness was actually connecting through. And then the rest of the connectors were pretty much just like your knock sensor, your knock sensors, water temp sensor, and engine temp sensor for the gauge cluster. And then we got the exhaust manifolds off, the output for the heater hose tube is removed. Now we can finally take the intake manifold off, we can take the valve cover off, and we're going to start taking the timing and cams off of the head, and that might actually do it as a whole one episode in itself. So I think we're at a good stopping point for this first episode, and we will see y'all in the next one where we're actually going to be removing the cylinder head.